now have you? I guess maybe I should read something from the Charlie Parker book because my editor's here.
Yeah.
So I have to say the same with that. But, and also, I'm going to read some of these, I'm going to read some sections from these short stories because I actually think that the way Black Americans actually are, as opposed to the way they act, is much more interesting than what we think they're like, or what they're usually depicted as. See, I don't know anyone.
We can hear you.
I don't know anyone.
But angle the
Okay.
the microphone.
Right.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, that's
Thank
I was
you.
talking in the wrong
Thank you.
one.
Thank you.
Wow.
Wanna
So I should have been talking in this.
break the horse.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for telling me. I didn't even know I was full time anyway.
There. That's
There,
it.
I think, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we got it now. But what I mean is, like, I know a number of people who are, for instance, from Jay-Z's background. I don't know any one of them who's as dumb as he is. or as he pretends to be. Or as he pretends to be. Because I've seen him interview Charlie Rose. I said, what is he talking about? You know. So, that's a fraud. And what I mean is, most guys who try to play like they're gangsters or rough, they ain't like that. See? And in the rap world, that's just like an ongoing theatrical fraud. Because when you meet these guys, most of them are so small. Unless they're really vicious and carry weapons, they're just talking a bunch of bullshit. You know, because I ran into this guy, Jim Benson. What? You know, because I didn't know he was that small. So basically what I'm saying is that if you got an impression about Irish guys from the size of James Cagney, that wouldn't necessarily be true. Or if you got an impression about Jewish gangsters from the size of Edward G. Robinson, no. No. Now I'm not saying that there aren't small gangsters who are truly vicious and who have murdered many people. There are people like that. But usually, those are not the people who make records that claim to be rough and tumble. See, they're too busy doing that to tell you about what they're going to do to you. I'm gonna get rid of him. Yeah, okay. See, because this is the first thing. See, people who actually want to hurt or kill people, they go about doing it. They don't advertise that they're going to do it. They do it. So whenever you look at these guys, you say, well, you know, he's from the projects, and so you know all we know is he says he's from the projects. We don't know anything else about it. So what I'm saying is, what I'm always trying to do is get to what I actually think is a more human quality to black people. Then black people have been successful acting like they're not. So what I mean is, you can now pretend to be a criminal guy, to hate women, to think they're all bitches. That's all a bunch of bullshit. Because it's just like these people will say, well, you know, the black woman, she suffers from a great lack of self-worth because of Vogue magazine and all of these lines and all of this stuff. And so these black women, they don't really know. First thing, let me get to this. I'm 68 years old. Now, from when I was a little boy to yesterday, most of the black women that I have seen or known, whether they look good or not, they think they are fine. They believe that. And so, you know, and so this whole thing, they're walking around like Melissa Harris Perry or somebody wondering, what happened to the white standard of first thing? They don't care about that. They actually think you ask him, when you go to these parties, in elementary school, junior high school, and high school, the most stuck-up girls at the parties are the bears. They're not the finest ones there. Don't have anywhere near the confidence of the girls who aren't even attracted to you. And they're like, how can she be like? Well, that's the way it actually works in the world. See, so we're gonna get to Charlie Parker, but momentarily, I want to read something from this short story about this woman who goes to work in a jazz club in the 1980s, and she's an intellectual from South Carolina, and she comes up to New York, and she's trying to find her way in New York because she was always one of the smartest girls wherever she was. But when she came to New York, you know, when you come into New York, you got to deal with something. See, because the first thing is nobody cares when you're smart, and nobody's impressed you. So you're smart. So what? So when she comes in, she starts looking at the way things are. Then she gets a job at this jazz club, and she starts working for this guy named Dwayne. And so this is when she runs into one of these black guys who's actually what she thinks he is, a dangerous person. So at that time, as a bumpkin, still fresh to the city, she loved to talk about art with this Wayne, who claimed to be from Louisiana, but lied so much about, he lied about so much in a charming way. Leola never knew if he was making up a life for himself almost every second. Telling the truth seemed to never enter his mind. This kind of thing was apparent for some reason common to slight men who were not particularly masculine, but ready to rumble if necessary. Wayne lost a lot of friends when they found out he could not be trusted, or he would bilk anyone he could, then claim to their faces that they were exaggerating the circumstances and could not have been cheated out of anything by him. No, not him. One writer, always rough and ready, whether or not you were, whipped on Wayne one night because he had stolen some books that had been left by the literary guy behind the bar after hours. He left them there and walked out kind of tipsy, but sure they would not turn up missing. Wayne claimed not to know what the guy was talking about because he had never seen any expensive art books given to this writer during one trip to Italy. Puffing up and continually talking as though flustered and forced to condescend to someone for making a childish case, Wayne was only allowed to claim his innocence 3 times before the new girl in town was frightened by how swiftly and powerfully her boss was lit into and stomped, never confessing, but all of the immobile staff knew he had lifted the guy's art books. The violence so shook the country girl, she found herself uncontrollably and mutually trembling in the arms of a very frightened Midwestern blonde in the kitchen. That kitchen was where Wayne and his buddies often hid from sight in a deep freezer and snorted their dough. The blonde was a singer with quite a big butt, who felt very, very angry because she had seen the boss casually put those art books in a big black straw bag and wished everyone good night before he jauntily left. One night in another bar with candles on the tables that were decorated with some small nets encasing the glass holders, keeping the flames in place, the guy who was known as a gorilla with a pen told the newcomer that what had enraged him so much was that he actually believed Wayne was a friend. The one reminiscent of the primate in Hostile Action had no idea his former buddy thought he could convince him that he remembered wrong and may have left the books someplace else. Well, he didn't, and he knew goddamn well he didn't, and was therefore determined to leave his name in ass-kicking letters all over his former buddy's body, including the teeth he broke when slamming Wayne's head on the floor after stomping him. The stupefied staff looked on and did not move toward the big man, who stepped up from the back of his helpless target and almost roared before finishing the drink he had bought prior to getting it on with his former friend, fully now bloody and left in a past tense. A red exclamation point, punctuated with his foot, was scraped down to clean the bottom of his shoe before departing. That Wayne never made any formal complaint to the police, convinced the guy that he was in the right and should never have trusted a white man known to steal from his friends. Everybody is somebody's fool, he mumbled to himself, and looked strangely at Leola as she listened to him and thought again of that nightmare night. The dental work, the wires in his mouth, and the highly polished false teeth preceded his demise that moved very quickly once the doctors determined his cough and the red blood he brought up were the beginning gestures of terminal lung cancer, which changed the color of his face to a cadaverous gray. That sight darkened until his grim visage was celebrated by all the former friends who felt impelled to see Wayne's condition go bad, him drink his heavy-duty scotch, drink and continue to smoke unfiltered French cigarettes. An actual zombie could have looked no worse than he did. Cuddling away in a wilting gray mess, Wayne's cancer seemed to appear in shadows shaped like leeches that quickly flattened into lances, then drove through his skin. They left no marks at the entry points, continued to gobble while moving through the bloodstream. Under the skin, disguised as a peculiar version of white blood cells gone mad, the leeches could not stop fighting against infection, but were distracted into eating away one's organs as though they were the enemy. Wayne sat at his bar deep inside of his voluminous clothes at the small number of final public appearances he could make. He puffed deeply on his smoke and took a big shot of his malt whiskey before laughing to Leola that her idea of what cancer was happened to be as good as any he had ever heard. His laughter had a sound that haunted her as much as the hoarseness that took over the voice of the gorilla with a pen, while his out-of-proportion eyes went wet as he offhandedly dwelled on the subject of losing a friend. A few king-sized tears were ignored as they rolled off his nose. He then winced at the water, saying much about a side of himself he didn't much spend time with, but did not deny when public, even for one country girl curious about the big city. The country girl thought this man reminded her a lot of back home, but he was not a damn fool, and knew not to get one step. But she was not a damn fool, and knew not to get one step closer to him. Too much chaos and aimless anger were mixed up with a magnetic tenderness for Leola, and even in this threatening city, too much overtly graceful masculinity in such a man felt dangerous, and too much for her to risk now or ever before. It added up to something suspicious. She knew not to flirt with him or answer his attempts at a far too dangerous game. Viola thanked the guy and slowly wandered back to work, where everybody was now pretty peaceful. The few trees in the West Village streets seemed more protective of her than ever before. A big serving of optimism came in the matter of an unexpected curveball to Wayne's ghastly-looking way of still doing things. Viola felt that Wayne got some sort of thrill every single time he saw that his homemade Dorian Gray face ruffled the way that Wayne... Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah. Ruffled away the calmness of anybody having no idea that he was that far gone. Some, expecting to laugh at his deterioration, were shocked into sympathy for the man who had done them as wrong as he could get away with, never confessing to being the piece of shit that he was. Wayne, ever tasteful, had a very dark, old, and highly regarded pianist from Mississippi who made the pilgrimage to New York in about 1940, nearly a half-century ago. He was booked to play after hours solo, usually opening his hour of playing unaccompanied with Alone Together. It was executed as the old master chewed his ever-present gum and swayed side to side. He figured out the song in a supremely witty way, with some extremely romantic sensuality that was noble and above the walk on the wild side, which was what most of the world knew about the upper rooms of romance. With his eyes closed, the pianist slowly made mention to the audience of an evening he would always remember. It was in a Manhattan penthouse apartment where he was playing a Fifth Avenue party all by himself and getting very generous tips. This was alluded to with the mention of a large Steuben glass goblet close to overflowing on the floor next to the piano. The doorbell rang, and Judy Garland came in. Saw him, reticently bowed as though the people were there as though the people there had applauded, but they hadn't. She stood there looking as though her shoes hurt and silent as if there was nothing the singer could do. Then she saw him again and reminded the piano player of what an admirer of his she had always been, then quietly asked if she could take a chair, step up, and sit on the piano for just one little bitty tune. Yes, indubitably. She laughed in a big, horsey laugh fashion as at the teasing question. There was no intention of anything other than singing one for all of her friends. Some of them were in the party, you know. Asked if he knew the man that got away. Of course he did. Judy, a real trooper, always effervescent and sad as a glass of champagne going flat. Took the seat on the piano because sitting up there, she said, she might even feel all of his sexy ruminations rise up through the wood and dissolve inside her. Dissolve until she felt as though someone was holding her secretly, and because he knew that a woman spent most of her day thinking about being touched and hoping that there was someone out there she could trust to do it. The grand old man from Mississippi then asked the ecstatically quiet audience to keep looking and listening for her, since, as we all knew, Judy might turn up at any moment. She was known for that. If nothing else, she smiled behind God. So, that's a piece of This one is called Rude Interlude. And it begins with what's called prologue kind of blues. Information loves to flow in and will, almost as if it is conscious in displaying itself as a memory or a haunt-filled dream. That enzyme inflammation will cut in and remove all of the fat from the slow dance. The form is irrelevant. Argentinian dancers can do the tango in variegated step shapes, moving the roller coaster range from thin to bulbous, young to middle or old age. Information always prefers grease to grace. Replacing it with a mucilage that scoots up until women are smoothly pulled so close it is crushed but sweet, delicious, sticky information. Taking its time to get an understanding above the blood on the dance floor. Slow dance. Now, okay, now it goes into this portrait of this woman named Bessie Coleman, who was a flag flyer in the 1930s. Bessie Coleman fell about a half a mile to her death, Albert told Leola. Some say she was probably dead before she crumbled against the earth. But Bessie was so strong that she might have lived that very second, probably turning in an attempt to fly on her own, and perhaps thinking of the seatbelt she should have fastened before taking off. Something so careless about a woman who had been a paragon of the precise. Alba said that she had become quite depressed when discovering that the leather belt hadn't been pulled through the buckle and the little piece of metal pushed against it pushed through a loop. It seemed to her that Bessie would always do everything exactly as it should have been done because there was no other way to most effectively fight against those who would limit your aspirations. Those hordes ready to eat you alive are drooling to share your carcass once some others had brought you down, like those wild dogs do gazelles by snipping through their hamstrings. But it was not as Alva would have it for Bessie, her personal patron saint. It should have been someone else's fault. She wanted her imperial best of his cap and goggles to have died because the man at the controls on this test flight had made a terrible mistake after the plane was suddenly flipped over, something only God could have corrected because it happened so fast and with such technological finality. That fact of Bessie falling out due to her own fault had actually crushed her in Alva. It was a blunder of such terrible proportions that she lived in fear of mistakes for far longer than anyone should. She said to Leola that her own sense of having grown up arrived in mistakes, small or large, no longer rewrote the essential meaning of other people. Piousness is part of youth. Compassion is part of maturity. Though some people think they go the other way around. They were not correct. All right, so now we're going to go over now.
Stand into the mic.
Okay. Now, we live in a period where the term genius is just an advertising term. It doesn't mean anything. Because now, if you can shoot marbles, well, you're called a genius of marble shooting. If you can do almost anything, somebody who has the job of advertising you as a product, they'll say he or she is the genius. And so, you know, you hear that term used so much that it doesn't mean anything. So, but Charlie Parker was actually what the term classically means. He was that. Now, part of what is being done in this book is an attempt to show you how he put together his talent, which he had to discover. Now, the first thing that you'll find out in this book is, see, Charlie Parker didn't start out talented at music. He didn't start out interested in music. He discovered his talent, and then he began to dig deep in himself, and he found that there was an enormous amount of it. But it wasn't apparent to him at first at all. In fact, he loaned his saxophone to somebody else. He didn't play much saxophone. But the one thing about him was that he was enormously spoiled. His mother, Addie Parker, she spoiled him to gills. She really spoiled him. And in fact, he was so spoiled. Now this is the Depression in Kansas City, Missouri, and Charlie Parker is wearing custom-made E.G. Simpson suits, and he wears knickers. And nobody in his neighborhood did. So when his first wife saw him, she could have been told that he was from another planet, because she'd never seen a young black kid who was as poor as everybody else dressed like that. Why? Because his mother had one of those. She arrived at the conclusion that the only thing that would keep Charlie Parker from being the kind of screw-up that his father was to give him everything he wanted, and then he would never want to leave home. Well, as we know, that wasn't the way it turned out. But I'm going to read you just a couple of pages about him leaving Kansas City and hitchhiking to Chicago on his way to New York. And this will give you an idea of what I'm after in the book, which is to meet the enormous challenge that you have when you have a nonfiction product or project. That is that you have to not be distracted by the information. What I mean is, because I was talking to the great historian David S. Reynolds, and we were talking about that that you have to take on the challenge of making the information come alive. So in this section, Charlie Parker is hitchhiking from Kansas City to Chicago. And you'll get a sense of Charlie Parker as a person, and also a sense of what all young guys during that period thought. Well, I mean, they were as confused in their way, perhaps, as young guys are confused today. But, they knew not to pretend to be gangsters. Because that could be very, very dangerous. Because you might make some guys who are the real thing come looking for you, and you don't want to do that. Though Charlie Parker would never ride in the luxury compartment of American trains, never stand out on an observation desk in a smoking jacket, martini in hand, he was as familiar with the truth and myth of railroads as any young man his age. It was an era when America still knew the world of trains firsthand, but also when the toy electric train was rising to its high position in the mind of the American boy. A fixture of newspapers and magazine ads full of bright ovals and miniature tracks, cyclopic eyes of light, quarter-sized wheels powerful beyond fatigue, a mesmerizing universe of precision machinery. Model trains capture how the American people had become interwoven with the technological imaginings of its inventors, transforming from two-dimensional engineering drawings into three-dimensional reality in a far-flung support system of mines, lumber camps, foundries, and factories of gargantuan parts and tiny screws, all of it functioning as a magnificent puzzle, a mighty exemplar of modernity given its unprecedented velocities in metallic percussion. The trains and the stations, the engines and boxcars, the rattling aura of faraway places and stories told by those who had ridden in the wheeled and coupled lines of coaches out to and over the blue horizon. All these put fresh images